Connections look good here. VPN 3 and 4. And oops. Bond. Seems to be giving me a problem. I don't know. I'm thinking it might not have brought up my bonded interface for some reason. Maybe I'm going to go ahead and remove my VPN connections here and try creating a new one. Might be with some of the modifications I did. I've noticed that I've modified the zeroshell install so much that like it works fine on the other one because it's default, but on mine I've made some modifications here. So let me see if I can create a new bond again. Maybe it was simply because it didn't have a description. Yeah, unfortunately, what it's doing is it's having a problem with me creating the bond through the web interface. So I'm in here. I can check the actual machine here. Bear with me for a minute here. Yeah, it looks like what's happening here is it's just not creating, it's got bond 0, it's just not creating the other bond interfaces for some reason. I'm even running a custom kernel here, so for just sake of argument here, it doesn't really matter because I've already got one set up here on bond 00. I'm going to go ahead and just remove these from the web interface. Okay. And I'll just go ahead and remove the other end too because I've already got one set up here. And in my case, I used 10.99.98.1 is on one side and 10.99.98.2 on the other side. Now normally what you'd see is, you know, link up like that, and it was like that on the other side, but for some reason it's giving me trouble on mine setting up a second bond. Once you get the bond connection up and you've got an IP assigned to both of them, what next thing you'll want to do is make sure you can ping it. So let's see if I can ping the other end. Since I'm pinging this from my machine, I want to make sure I can go ahead and ping basically the other machine through the bonded connection, and I can, so that looks good. Let me go ahead and zoom out a little here. Next thing you do is actually set up the bonded gateway as the IP as a gateway. So in my case, I didn't want everything going through the bonded VPN, and the main reason for this is that all the traffic that does that obviously has to go through the machine in the data center, and that uses bandwidth. And I do quite a few bandwidth intensive things, which I don't necessarily need the higher speed. So, you know, I just call this description my bond, you know, my bond gateway, whatever. Bond VPN is what I did before. I put the IP address. So basically, this is what I did. Just set it up just like this. And don't need to set the network interface because you're setting an IP. And I had this. I just added it as disabled because I want the gateway there, but I don't actually want it to be as traffic actively going through it. Unfortunately, zeroshell doesn't have a mode to add a gateway and just not still be able to easily use it without having it in your load balancing pool. So if you have them all at the same weight, then 1/3 of your traffic's going to go through the bonded connection, which I didn't want. So I set it as disabled. And the main reason you add it in the first place is simply so you can still set up rules. Now on my balancing rules here, I've got quite a few. The big two ones I mainly use the bond for is basically, if you know IP tables at all, these are basically just having destination traffic that's going to destination port 80 and 443, i.e. HTTP and HTTPS. I have it going through the bonded connection. I can, here, if I change one of these, I can show you what the rule looked like for HTTP. Basically, almost everything's left blank. From protocol all, you got to change it to TCP, otherwise you can't put a port. Destination port 80, and then target gateway, you just put your gateway. And it's pretty much as simple as that as far as creating rules. If you want, you can simply add it as a gateway and just put it as a really high weight, and everything will go through the bonded VPN. I just simply didn't want that behavior. Now normally the rules won't work if the gateway is not active, and you can get around that on zeroshell via an IP route rule. Let's see here. I'm gonna have to set my camera down here for a little bit here. Okay. Basically, if you see this IP rule show, you can see that I've got this FW mark is basically how the packets are being marked by IP tables. If I go to my balancing rules again here, you'll see that basically it's saying to set mark 0669. So this 069 is my gateway, or it's basically my bonded gateway. You can figure out, like, if you notice, you have a lookup and it's in decimal, and all it is basically this is hex and it's being converted to decimal. So I've got basically 69, which is 105. I mean, there's a bunch of different ways you can convert it to hex and decimal. I'm just using BC to convert the decimal, but it'll just line up with whatever the hex was. So I'm gonna try to get this a little cleaner. I know it's getting a little blurry there. Basically, the decimal form for 69 is 105. So normally, what you would see here is you wouldn't see this one right here, this line, because I had to add it myself. It wasn't added by default because the gateway wasn't active. So all it really was is all this second line. I mean, it's just like the other ones, is from. The only thing I did to add this was basically add IP and then rule and then add. Oops. So I basically just did this line right there, so my rules take effect even when it's, and not having all traffic being routed through the bonded VPN. So basically what I've got here is just HTTP traffic. The other thing you can do to specify specific behavior, and this doesn't even require setting up the gateway and the net balancer, is add a static route. And when you add the static route, you can simply use the bonded gateway, and you can do it to a specific network or a machine. Like in my case, I have one set up for my server, which I do a lot of rsyncs from, and I just put its IP address. I create a static route, and that way when I use rsync, it'll go over the bonded VPN connection, and it'll basically give me double the speed. This was the main reason I set up the bonding, because doing single connection type of traffic is able to get much faster speeds through the bond, basically double or triple if you've got 3 connections. It generally works pretty well. There are some downsides to this. Part of the problem with doing round robin for balancing the packets through the interfaces is it's just basically alternating interface for each packet sent. And because of this, because of the differences in latency and stuff like that, one of the downsides of doing this is you get out of order packets. And the biggest downside of this is if it's really high latency, it can cause throughput bottlenecks. I mean, luckily it's pretty good latency from my machine to my server that I'm doing the bonding through. But if you have higher latency, then it's probably not going to give you very good performance. With one of the downsides of it, though, even with being good latency, is that you'll get a lot of acknowledgement packets, like when you send basically when you're downloading something and whatnot, and you're receiving data from the server. Well, every time when you're receiving packets, you send a packet back, saying a much smaller packet, saying, "Hey, I received this packet," and that way the server knows not to have to retransmit it. Well, when you get a lot of out-of-order packets like that, you get a lot of acknowledgement packets retransmitted, and they're generally small, but it can double the amount of data used on the upstream when doing downstream. So, like normally, if you downloaded it 50 megabits and you'd use 100 kilobytes a second upstream, now it might be 150 or 200 kilobytes a second. But it will allow for your connection to be basically double the speed or triple the speed, whatever it might be. The only real thing you need to do on the server side of things is set up in the NAT table here. You want to make sure that NAT is enabled on the interface on the server. So basically you can route internet traffic through the VPN over the physical Ethernet port on the server. I'd say that's pretty much everything. I don't know if there's any other thing I'm forgetting right now. I just kind of decided to go ahead and throw together this video. I didn't prepare that much. I'd say I'll go ahead and post this on YouTube. If anybody has any questions, you can basically send me a message through YouTube, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. If anyone's curious, you don't need that very powerful of a box. If you can see up here, the one I'm using at my location, if I can get this damn thing to not be blurry, it's only a Atom 1.6 gigahertz Atom CPU, and from tests I've done, it seems about fast enough, at least without encryption, to do about 200 megabits of throughput on bonding, and it's a pretty low-end Atom box, so I would say almost any old machine will work. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I needed to say here before I finish up. I'd say that's probably it. You can kind of see my server is on the same network as the one that's the zeroshell box. So, like if I trace route my server, here we go. You'll see it actually, whoops, yeah, this is, zeroshell did not have Traceroute installed, so I actually installed it. Let me do this actually on not on the zeroshell box, but my machine behind it. You'll see the Traceroute is really low, and you can see it going, it's really small, a very small number of hops, because it's basically staying within the same network. And it goes basically through my zeroshell box, and then over the bonded VPN, and then basically one hop that's at the network where my server is to my server. Now if I do like just another IP that's even on my server, but I don't have a bond, I don't have it set up to go through the bond, you can see that the route's much bigger. So you can see that it's taking effect. Also, because the fact that you're routing traffic through the remote server, this means that all remote servers are going to see the IP address of the bonding box, not your own ISP. The way I got speed test to still report my correct ISP and stuff is I simply set up a static route to the IP address that speedtest.net runs off of, and had it go through one of my FiOS connections. So that way it actually reports Verizon, even though it's kind of going through Verizon and then my server and then to speedtest. Anyway, definitely let me know, give me some feedback, and let me know if things need to get added or go into more detail, and I'll try to do a little better job. I really just kind of didn't go through this beforehand and just decided to make a video, since I probably had a good 6 or 7 people ask me how I'm doing this. So anyway, let me know.